All doctors gave up. Billionaire declared dead, until poor single dad slept beside her overnight. No one at Crestview International Hospital believed the woman in Suite 1702 would ever open her eyes again. The official medical report had already been signed by 12 specialists, neurologists, trauma surgeons, critical care experts, all agreeing on the same devastating conclusion. Elena Vos, billionaire founder of Vos Dynamics, was clinically beyond recovery. To the world she was already gone. To the hospital she was a case number. To her board of directors she was a legal transition. But to one exhausted, broke single father standing unnoticed in the corner of the hallway, she was the only person who had ever truly believed in him. And he refused to walk away. A room full of experts, and zero hope. Machines surrounded Elena's body like silent sentinels, glowing in shades of blue and green. Tubes snaked from her mouth and nose, disappearing into ventilators that breathed for lungs that had forgotten how. Sensors dotted her chest, converting faint electrical activity into data streams scrolling across monitors. Her once vibrant face, the face that had appeared on magazine covers and keynote stages, now looked fragile and pale, framed by hospital sheets that swallowed her small form. Dr. Nathan Cole, chief neurologist, stood at the foot of the bed reviewing scans for what must have been the 100th time. Diffuse axonal injury, he said quietly, tapping the screen. Severe brainstem damage. No cortical response. No reflexes. We've run every test twice. Beside him, the trauma surgeon crossed his arms. There's nothing left to do medically. Near the window stood Elena's younger brother, Marcus Vos, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that looked more appropriate for a boardroom than a hospital room. His jaw was tight, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights, or perhaps from calculating the empire he was about to inherit. So you're saying, Marcus said slowly, she's not coming back. Dr. Cole met his gaze with practiced professionalism. In my 32 years of medicine, I have never seen a patient recover from injuries of this magnitude. Silence settled heavily over the room. A lawyer cleared his throat. Then we should discuss implementation of her advance directive. The words sounded clinical, efficient, bloodless, as if they were discussing shutting down a factory, not ending a human life. Marcus nodded stiffly. Do it. From visionary to case closed. 3 weeks earlier, Elena Vos had stood on a stage in Geneva, delivering a speech about ethical technology and global responsibility. Her company's innovations had revolutionized renewable energy infrastructure, making her one of the most influential entrepreneurs on the planet. Then came the crash. A rain-slick highway. A collision no one could fully explain. A car twisted beyond recognition. The media frenzy lasted exactly 4 days. Then the story faded, replaced by politics, celebrity scandals, and the endless churn of breaking news. In the hospital, however, the consequences lingered. At first, the private suite overflowed with flowers, executives, assistants, and distant relatives suddenly eager to express concern. Security had to limit visitors. But as doctors' reports grew more pessimistic, the crowd thinned. By the time the final prognosis was delivered, the room felt like a mausoleum. No laughter. No whispered prayers. Only machines. The man who didn't belong there. Downstairs in the lobby, Daniel Reyes shifted uncomfortably on a leather chair that cost more than his monthly rent. His work boots were dusty from construction sites. His jeans were faded. His jacket smelled faintly of sawdust and cheap detergent. Everything about him screamed wrong place. People walked past without looking at him. Executives with briefcases, families clutching coffee cups, nurses moving briskly with purpose. Daniel had none of those things. He only had a crumpled text message on his phone. Elena Vos hospitalized. Critical condition. Might not survive. The message came from an unknown number. No explanation. No context. Just a bomb dropped into his ordinary life. He stared at the words again as if they might rearrange themselves into something less final. Elena. After 10 years of silence. After 10 years of convincing himself she had moved into a world where people like him simply didn't exist. His chest tightened. He remembered late nights studying together when they were both broke students, her fierce determination, the way she refused to accept limits. She had climbed to the top. He had stayed on the ground. And now she might die without ever knowing he had never stopped being grateful for her. Turned away. Daniel approached the reception desk, heart pounding. I'm here to see Elena Vos. The receptionist looked up, her smile polite but distant, the kind reserved for strangers who would not be granted access. Are you family? No. I'm a friend. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Her expression shifted subtly. I'm sorry. Only immediate family is permitted in the ICU. Daniel swallowed. Please. I just want to see her for a minute. I understand, she said gently, clearly not understanding at all. But those are the rules. Rules. The word felt like a locked door. Daniel nodded slowly, backing away. He stepped outside into the evening air, the glass doors closing behind him with a quiet finality. He sat on a concrete bench near the entrance, staring at nothing. People came and went. Ambulances arrived. A child laughed somewhere across the parking lot. Life continued, indifferent to his personal earthquake. A stranger notices. An older nurse stepped outside for a cigarette, her posture weary, eyes sharp from decades of seeing humanity at its most fragile. She noticed him immediately. You've been sitting there a long time, she said. Daniel looked up, startled. Yeah. You waiting for someone? He hesitated. I don't know. She studied him carefully. You here for Voss? His heart jumped. Yes. Her expression softened slightly. You family? No. She took a slow drag, exhaling toward the darkening sky. They signed the papers today, she said quietly. Daniel's stomach dropped. What papers? Withdrawal of life support. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. The words hit like a physical blow. Tomorrow. Less than 12 hours away. He stood abruptly. I need to see her. The nurse shook her head. Rules? Please. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she flicked ash into the bin and leaned closer. Service elevator on the east side. Staff entrance. Security's light after 9. She met his eyes. I didn't tell you that. Crossing the line. At 9:12 p.m., Daniel stepped into the quiet hallway outside Suite 1702. His heart pounded so loudly he was certain someone would hear it. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside, machines hummed softly. He pushed the door open. And froze. Elena lay motionless, swallowed by white sheets, her once commanding presence reduced to a fragile silhouette. For a moment he couldn't breathe. This wasn't the woman he remembered, the unstoppable force who used to argue passionately about changing the world. This looked like someone already gone. Slowly he approached the bed. Up close, he could see faint bruising along her temple, the unnatural stillness, the absence of the energy that had once radiated from her like sunlight. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. Cold. Too cold. His throat tightened. Hey Elena, he whispered. It's Daniel. No response. Of course not. I don't know if you can hear me, he continued, voice trembling. But I'm here. The machines beeped steadily, indifferent witnesses. A flood of unsaid words. Memories surged through him. Late-night study sessions, cheap coffee, dreams spoken aloud when the future still felt wide open. You once told me I wasn't a failure, he said softly. Remember that? I didn't believe you, but I never forgot. He swallowed hard. You said people like us just needed one person to believe in us. A tear slipped down his cheek before he even realized he was crying. You became everything you said you would. I didn't. But I kept going. Because of you. He squeezed her hand gently. So you don't get to quit before I say thank you. Caught, but not removed. The door opened suddenly. A young nurse stepped inside, eyes widening when she saw him. Sir, visitors aren't allowed. Daniel stood quickly, heart racing. I'm sorry. I just needed. She looked from him to Elena, to their joined hands. Something in her expression changed. Compassion battling protocol. You can't stay, she said quietly. Please, he whispered. Just a little longer. She hesitated, then nodded once. 30 minutes. After that you're gone. A decision that changes everything. 30 minutes passed. No one came to escort him out. Midnight approached. The older nurse returned, the same one from outside. She took in the scene. Daniel still beside the bed, eyes red, refusing to leave. You planning to stay all night? She asked. He hadn't planned anything. But suddenly the answer felt obvious. Yes. She studied him, then handed him a thin blanket. Floor's hard, she said. Don't get caught. Daniel spread the blanket beside the bed and lay down, staring up at the ceiling. He could hear Elena's breathing machine above him, steady, mechanical, like a metronome counting down the last hours of her life. Everyone else had walked away. He wouldn't. Not tonight. The first impossible sign. Hours passed in uneasy silence. At around 3:40 a.m., Daniel noticed something. The heart monitor. It had been steady all night. Now the number flickered. 58, 60, 62. He sat up instantly, pulse hammering. Was the machine malfunctioning? Hey, he whispered urgently, gripping her hand. Elena? The number climbed again. Daniel stared in disbelief. He rushed into the hallway, finding the older nurse. Something changed, he said breathlessly. Her heart rate. She followed him back, skeptical. Checked the monitors. Reviewed the data. Her brow furrowed. It's elevated, she admitted. But that doesn't mean consciousness. Daniel didn't care. It was the first change anyone had seen in weeks. Proof, however small, that something inside her was still fighting. Dawn approaches. By 5 a.m. doctors had been called. Tests repeated. Scans ordered. Staff whispered in tense clusters. Yet the official conclusion remained unchanged. No meaningful neurological activity. Likely autonomic fluctuation. Prepare for scheduled withdrawal. At 7:30 a.m. Marcus Voss arrived, flanked by lawyers. He barely glanced at Daniel, just another nobody in worn clothes. Remove life support at 8, he instructed coldly. Daniel stepped forward, desperation blazing. Wait, please. Something changed last night. Marcus looked at him with open contempt. And who exactly are you? A friend. Marcus scoffed. My sister doesn't have friends who look like you. The words hit like a slap. Security was summoned. Daniel was ordered to leave. As guards approached, he turned back one last time and saw Elena's eyelids twitch. So faintly it could have been imagination. Except it wasn't. The billionaire everyone abandoned, and the only man who refused to leave. Security had already taken Daniel Reyes by the arm when it happened again. A tiny movement. So small most people in the room didn't even notice. But Daniel did. Elena, he shouted, twisting free just enough to point. Her eyes, they moved. The guards tightened their grip. Sir, you need to come with us. No, wait. Look at her. Dr. Nathan Cole glanced up impatiently, clearly assuming this was the desperate outburst of someone refusing to accept reality. But then the cardiac monitor spiked. A sharp, irregular climb. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but undeniably different from the flat stability of a body merely being maintained by machines. The room froze. When certainty begins to crack. Hold on, one of the nurses said, stepping closer to the bed. Elena's eyelids fluttered. Not fully open. Not conscious. But movement. Dr. Cole leaned forward sharply. Check pupillary response. A penlight flicked on. He lifted one eyelid carefully. Silence. Then. Minimal reaction, he muttered, disbelief creeping into his voice. Marcus Voss scoffed. Reflex. Nothing more. But the staff didn't look convinced anymore. Another beep, faster now. Elena's heart rate climbed to 78. For the first time since the accident, her body wasn't behaving like a system waiting to shut down. It was behaving like something trying to wake up. The man they tried to throw out. Daniel stood between the guards, chest heaving. Don't pull the plug, he said hoarsely. Please. Marcus turned to him, eyes cold as steel. You don't get a vote. I stayed with her, Daniel shot back. All night. Something changed. Marcus laughed, a short, cruel sound. You think your presence magically healed catastrophic brain trauma? I don't know what happened, Daniel said. I just know she wasn't like this before. Dr. Cole raised a hand, silencing them. No one touched the machines yet. That sentence alone sent shockwaves through the room. The withdrawal had been scheduled down to the minute. Everything was supposed to proceed smoothly, clinically, predictably. Now uncertainty had crept in, messy, inconvenient, human. A body that refuses to give up. Elena's fingers twitched. Barely noticeable. But unmistakable. The nurse gasped softly. That's voluntary movement. Marcus shook his head aggressively. Involuntary nerve firing. Maybe, the nurse said quietly. But I've never seen it this coordinated. Daniel's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He leaned forward despite the guard's grip. Elena, if you can hear me, you don't have to fight alone. Her heart rate spiked again. Dr. Cole stared at the monitor like it had personally betrayed him. This doesn't make sense. Medicine thrived on patterns, probabilities, outcomes. This fell outside all three. The truth no one wanted to admit. Cancel the withdrawal, Dr. Cole said finally. Marcus stepped forward sharply. You can't be serious. I am, the doctor replied. We need further evaluation. She's been brain dead for weeks. Clinically unresponsive, Dr. Cole corrected. Not legally brain dead. There's a difference. Marcus's jaw tightened. Every extra hour meant uncertainty. Every extra test meant delays in transferring control of the company, the estate, the power. Daniel saw it in his eyes. This wasn't grief. This was inconvenience. Why Daniel stayed silent for years. As doctors swarmed the room, Daniel sank into a chair, shaking. Memories crashed into him. He remembered the last time he had seen Elena, standing at a train station with a single suitcase, eyes blazing with determination. "I'm not meant to stay small, Danny," she had said. "And neither are you." He had smiled, pretending to believe her. But inside he had already decided she was wrong. People like her escaped. People like him endured. When she left, he buried the part of himself that dared to dream. Until now. Tests that defied logic. Within minutes, Elena was rushed for emergency imaging. Daniel wasn't allowed into the scanning suite, so he waited in the hallway, pacing, hands trembling, mind racing with fragile hope. Marcus stood nearby, speaking quietly into his phone. "Yes, delay everything," he said through clenched teeth. "There's been a complication. Not a miracle. Not she might live. Just a complication." Daniel's jaw tightened. A nurse finally speaks the truth. The older nurse approached him gently. "You stayed all night?" she asked. He nodded. "Did you talk to her?" "Yeah." "About what?" "Everything." She studied him thoughtfully. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "people don't come back because of medicine." Daniel frowned. "Then why?" "Because someone gives them a reason to." He didn't know whether to believe that. But he held on to it anyway. The results no one could explain. An hour later, Dr. Cole emerged from the imaging room looking shaken. Marcus stepped forward immediately. "Well?" The doctor hesitated, something Daniel suspected he rarely did. "There's measurable brain activity." Marcus blinked. "That's impossible." "It shouldn't be happening," Dr. Cole admitted. "But it is." Daniel felt dizzy. Activity. Not recovery. Not consciousness. But activity meant one critical thing. She wasn't gone. The hidden truth about Elena Voss. While doctors debated next steps, Daniel sat alone, thinking about something he had never told anyone. Years ago, before Elena became famous, she had volunteered at a shelter where Daniel sometimes worked odd jobs. She treated everyone there like equals. Janitors, addicts, undocumented workers, people society preferred not to see. Not out of charity. Out of genuine respect. "You never know who someone will become," she once told him. Now the irony hit him hard. No one in this hospital had looked twice at him. Except her. Even unconscious, she seemed to recognize something. Marcus reveals his true face. Marcus paced furiously, anger barely contained. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "A tiny fluctuation doesn't change the outcome." Dr. Cole met his gaze steadily. "It changes everything medically. My sister would never want to live like this. That decision isn't yours alone anymore." Marcus's eyes darkened. For the first time Daniel saw fear there. Not fear of losing Elena. Fear of losing control. A moment no one saw coming. As staff prepared to return Elena to her room, Daniel stood nearby, unsure whether he would be allowed to stay. Then something happened that silenced the entire corridor. Elena's hand moved. Not a twitch. Not a reflex. Her fingers curled weakly, as if trying to grasp something. And they closed around Daniel's sleeve. Every person present froze. Daniel stopped breathing. Her grip was faint, but intentional. A single fragile connection between the woman everyone had written off, and the man everyone had dismissed. Tears blurred his vision. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not leaving." Her fingers tightened just a little. Enough to erase any doubt. Hope becomes dangerous. Marcus stared in stunned silence. Dr. Cole looked like a man witnessing the collapse of everything he thought he understood about the human brain. The older nurse smiled softly as if she had expected this all along. But hope is never simple. Because hope threatens plans. And Marcus Voss had plans that did not include his sister waking up. The decision that changes the story. Dr. Cole turned to the staff. "She goes back to intensive care. Full monitoring. No withdrawal." Marcus stepped forward sharply. "This isn't over." "No," the doctor agreed. "It isn't." Daniel looked down at Elena's hand still clutching his sleeve, fragile, trembling, alive. For the first time he allowed himself to believe something impossible. She might come back. But recovery was only the beginning. Because surviving the crash was one battle. What came next would be far more dangerous. Power. Greed. Secrets buried for years. And a brother who had already begun dividing her empire. As Elena was wheeled back toward her room, Daniel walked beside her, refusing to let go. He didn't notice Marcus watching them, eyes cold, calculating, furious. Because in that moment, Marcus understood something terrifying. The only person Elena seemed to respond to was a poor single father who had nothing to offer except loyalty. And that made him dangerous. She opened her eyes, and the first face she saw was the nobody they tried to remove. Elena Voss didn't wake up like they show in movies. There was no dramatic gasp, no sudden sitting upright, no instant recognition. Her return was quieter than that, more terrifying, more fragile. It started with a tear. A single tear slipping from the corner of her eye while her body still lay motionless, while machines still breathed for her, while the hospital staff still spoke over her like she was furniture. Daniel Reyes saw it first. He leaned over her bed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Elena, if you're in there, you don't have to be brave. Just be here." Her eyelashes trembled. The heart monitor quickened. And in that moment, Daniel realized something that made his stomach twist into a knot. Elena wasn't just fighting to live. She was fighting to come back to a world that had already moved on without her. And someone powerful, wanted it to stay that way. A hook no one expected. At 6:58 a.m., 2 minutes before the day shift officially began, a technician entered Suite 1702 holding a clipboard and looking confused. "I'm here for the transfer," he said. Dr. Cole frowned. "Transfer? She's ICU. No transfer authorized." The technician flipped through pages. "I have a signed order. Private transport. Off-site facility. It says," he squinted, "Voss Life Continuity Center." Daniel felt cold flood his veins. "Who signed that?" Dr. Cole demanded. The technician pointed down at the bottom line. "Marcus Voss." The room fell silent. Marcus stood near the door, arms folded, expression smooth like polished stone. "It's for her dignity," he said. "She'll be more comfortable outside a public hospital environment." Dr. Cole's voice sharpened. "Crestview is not a public hospital. And she is not stable enough for transfer." Marcus lifted his chin. "I'm her family. I have authority." Daniel stepped forward, rage cracking through his fear. "You were ready to pull the plug yesterday." Marcus's eyes flicked to him like Daniel was a stain on the carpet. "You're still here?" Then Elena's fingers moved again. Weak, trembling, but deliberate. And for the first time Marcus looked rattled, not because his sister moved but because Daniel saw it. Elena's first word wasn't a word. By mid-morning Dr. Cole ordered sedation lowered, carefully, inch by inch, like someone disarming a bomb. Every adjustment was measured, every response watched. Daniel stayed by the bed, ignoring the stares, ignoring the way nurses whispered about him. The construction guy who wouldn't leave, the stranger with no badge, no suit, no reason to be in the Billionaire suite. At 10:13 a.m. Elena's eyelids fluttered open for half a second. Her gaze was unfocused, glazed, like she was looking through fog. But her eyes landed on Daniel. And her breathing, still assisted, shifted rhythm. Her heart rate climbed. A nurse gasped softly. Dr. Cole leaned in. "Elena? If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Nothing. Daniel's throat tightened. "Elena, squeeze mine." Her fingers barely curled. Not a full squeeze. Not strong. But enough to make Daniel's knees threaten to buckle. She didn't have strength for words. But she had enough strength to choose. And she chose him. The board arrives like vultures. The moment there was proof Elena might wake, the people who loved her suddenly reappeared. By afternoon, Suite 1702's hallway filled with lawyers in tailored suits and board members wearing sympathetic faces like masks. A woman with sharp cheekbones and colder eyes introduced herself to the nurse's station. Patricia Halloway. Interim Executive Chair. Interim. The word itself was a declaration. Daniel overheard two men whispering near the elevators. Stock stabilized since the death report. If she wakes, it's chaos. Marcus approached Dr. Cole with a rehearsed sorrow. "We need to control information. Media can't know." Dr. Cole didn't look impressed. "My priority is the patient." Marcus lowered his voice. "And mine is protecting her legacy." Daniel almost laughed because legacy was a fancy way to say control. Daniel gets humiliated again. Later, a hospital administrator marched into the room, clipboard in hand, face tight. "Sir," she said to Daniel, "you are not authorized to be in this unit." Daniel didn't move. She held my hand. The administrator's smile turned thin. "That doesn't make you family." Marcus stepped in smoothly. "He's been a disturbance." Remove him. Daniel felt his face burn. You're trying to ship her away. Marcus didn't even blink. I'm trying to ensure my sister is cared for by the best. You mean the most controllable? Patricia Holloway's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. Daniel looked around at the polished shoes, expensive watches, and carefully staged concern. Then he looked down at Elena, still pale, still fragile, still fighting. His voice shook, but he stood taller. You all left her. I didn't. Marcus stepped closer, voice like ice. Security. 2 guards appeared. Daniel's heart pounded. He leaned over Elena, desperate. Elena, if you can hear me, don't let them do this. Please. Her eyelids fluttered again. And then, barely audible like a breath scraping through sand, Elena made a sound. Not a word. A syllable. D-un. Daniel froze. The guards froze. Dr. Cole's eyes widened. Marcus's face drained of color. Because the name she tried to speak wasn't Marcus. It was his. The hospital chooses a side. Dr. Cole stepped forward, firm, decisive. No one removes him. The administrator blinked. Doctor. Dr. Cole cut her off. Patient response is stronger in his presence. Until further notice, he stays. Marcus's jaw flexed. This is ridiculous. Dr. Cole's voice hardened. You don't get to override medicine because you dislike what it implies. Patricia's tone became dangerous. We fund half this hospital wing. Dr. Cole stared her down. Then fund it with integrity. For the first time since Elena's accident, Daniel saw something he hadn't expected from people in power. A spine. Not everyone was for sale. Not yet. Elena's memory returns like lightning. That evening, the sedation was lowered again. Elena's eyes opened longer this time. They moved, slow, shaky, scanning the room. She looked confused, frightened, trapped inside her own body. Daniel leaned close. You're safe. You're in the hospital. You were in an accident. Her gaze landed on him again, and her brow tightened like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Her lips moved. Daniel held his breath. The word came out broken. Daniel? He nodded rapidly, tears spilling. Yes, it's me. Elena's eyes glistened. Then her gaze shifted, past Daniel, to Marcus standing near the door. And something changed in her face. Fear wasn't the right word. It was sharper than fear. It was recognition of danger. Her fingers trembled. Her pulse monitor spiked. Dr. Cole noticed immediately. Elena, look at me. Slow breaths. Elena's gaze snapped back to Daniel as if he were an anchor. Her heart rate eased slightly. But the message was clear. Marcus didn't just upset her. He terrified her. The secret Elena tried to warn him about. Dr. Cole asked questions softly. Elena, do you know what year it is? Pause. 6, she whispered, then grimaced in pain. Daniel swallowed. Elena, don't push. Just rest. Elena's eyes locked on him urgently. Her lips moved again, barely forming the words. Don't trust. Daniel leaned in. Don't trust who? Elena's eyes flicked toward the door again. Marcus. Elena's throat worked, voice struggling. Don't trust. Her body shuddered. The monitor beeped faster. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Cole raised a hand. Stop. Enough. She's overstimulated. Elena closed her eyes, exhausted. But the warning had landed like a stone in Daniel's chest. Don't trust Marcus. A billionaire, barely awake from the edge of death, warning a broke construction worker about her own brother. What kind of world had Daniel stepped into? Why Elena was really in that crash? That night, after Elena stabilized, Dr. Cole pulled Daniel aside. You're not family, Dr. Cole said bluntly. So I can't share everything. But I can tell you this, what's happening isn't normal. Daniel's voice trembled. She tried to warn me. Dr. Cole nodded. Her stress response spikes when her brother enters. That's not just discomfort. That's trauma. Daniel's stomach turned. Are you saying Marcus did something to her? Dr. Cole didn't answer directly. He just said, watch carefully. People behave differently when money is involved. As Daniel returned to Elena's room, he noticed something he had missed before. A quiet man in a suit standing near the far wall, too still, too alert, pretending to check his phone but watching the room. Not hospital security. Not family. Not staff. Daniel's pulse quickened. He sat beside Elena's bed and whispered, I'm here. Elena's fingers moved weakly toward him, and Daniel covered her hand with his. Outside the room, Marcus spoke into his phone again, voice low. She's responding to him, Marcus hissed. I need this handled. The trap tightens. At 2:30 a.m. the older nurse, the one who had helped Daniel, returned to check vitals. She looked tense. Listen, she whispered to Daniel. There's been a request to limit your access again. Daniel's throat tightened. From Marcus. The nurse nodded. And there's more. Someone tried to swap out her medication earlier. Daniel's blood ran cold. Swap it for what? The nurse's eyes hardened. Something that could make her look worse. Or never wake. Daniel stared at Elena, sleeping under harsh hospital light, fragile and helpless. A billionaire in a hospital bed. Surrounded by people who wanted her alive only if she stayed silent. And suddenly Daniel understood the truth. Elena surviving wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the real fight. Elena's eyes open. Fully. Near dawn, Elena's eyes opened again, this time wide, aware, terrified. She tried to speak, panic rising. Daniel leaned in quickly. It's okay. You're safe. Elena's lips moved urgently. Phone? She rasped. In bag. Daniel blinked. Your bag? Where? Elena struggled, then pointed weakly toward the closet where her personal belongings had been stored. Daniel stood, heart pounding, and opened the closet. There was a designer handbag on the top shelf. He reached inside and felt something cold and solid. A second phone. Hidden. Daniel's breath caught. Elena's eyes locked on him with fierce urgency, and she mouthed two words without sound. But Daniel could read her lips. Evidence. Marcus. The moment before the storm. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket just as footsteps approached. Marcus entered the room, face calm, eyes calculating. Well, he said softly, look who decided to play hero. Daniel didn't answer. Because for the first time, Daniel wasn't just a poor single dad sleeping on a hospital floor. He was the only person in that hospital holding the key to Elena's truth. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Daniel could hear. You think she chose you, Marcus whispered. But you're just convenient. Daniel met his gaze, steady. And you're afraid. Marcus smiled thinly. Be careful. People like you don't survive in my world. Elena's eyes widened and her heart monitor beeped faster. Daniel grabbed her hand, grounding her, whispering, I'm here. Marcus looked down at Elena, then back at Daniel, like he was deciding something. Then he turned and walked out. But Daniel knew what that meant. The next move wouldn't be paperwork. It would be war. The evidence that could destroy an empire, and the man who risked everything to reveal it. Daniel Reyes didn't dare breathe as the door clicked shut behind Marcus. The hidden phone felt impossibly heavy in his pocket, like a small piece of metal carrying the weight of $1 billion empire. Elena's eyes were still locked on him, wide with urgency, fear, and something else. Trust. Not in the doctors. Not in the lawyers. Not in the powerful people surrounding her. In him. A man with worn boots, overdue bills, and nothing to offer except the one thing no one else had given her. Loyalty without conditions. Daniel leaned closer. Is this what you wanted me to find? Her fingers twitched weakly in his grip. Yes. A hook that changes everything. The screen lit up. No passcode. Just a single folder on the home screen labeled, If anything happens. Daniel's stomach dropped. Inside were videos, documents, audio recordings, timestamps spanning months. At the top sat a video file marked with yesterday's date. Hands trembling, Daniel tapped it. Elena appeared on screen, alive, vibrant, sitting in what looked like her home office. Her hair was neatly styled, her expression focused but tense. If you're seeing this, she said, voice steady but eyes tired, then something went wrong. Daniel felt his chest tighten. I don't know who will find this. Maybe my lawyers, maybe law enforcement, or maybe someone I trust more than either of them. Her gaze shifted slightly, like she was imagining someone specific. Daniel swallowed hard. Marcus is trying to force a merger I refused to sign, she continued. Voss Dynamics would lose control of its renewable infrastructure patents. It would put energy grids in the hands of companies that don't care about safety. Her voice wavered for the first time. When I said no, things started happening. Surveillance. Threats. Pressure from board members suddenly siding with him. Daniel's pulse thundered. Then Elena leaned closer to the camera, eyes burning. If I end up dead, it won't be an accident. Why the crash wasn't random. Daniel felt the room tilt. He looked up at Elena in the bed, pale, fragile, barely alive, and realized the horrifying implication. She hadn't just been unlucky. She had been targeted. Elena watched him, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Her lips moved silently. Crash. Daniel nodded slowly. You think he caused it? Her fingers tightened weakly around his hand. Yes. The system was already compromised. A knock sounded at the door. Daniel quickly locked the phone and slipped it deeper into his pocket. Patricia Holloway stepped inside, her smile polished and empty. How is she? She asked sweetly, though she didn't look at Elena, only at the monitors. Stronger, Daniel said cautiously. Patricia's gaze flicked to him, assessing. You've become quite attached. Daniel didn't answer. She stepped closer to the bed, lowering her voice as if speaking to a child. Elena, sweetheart, you don't need to worry about anything. We're handling everything for you. Elena's pulse jumped. Daniel saw it. Patricia did too, and her eyes sharpened. Interesting. Doctor says stimulation isn't good, Daniel said quietly. Maybe she should rest. Patricia smiled thinly. You're not her doctor. No, Daniel replied. Just the one she responds to. For a split second, something dark flashed across Patricia's face. Then she turned and left. Daniel exhaled shakily. Elena blinked slowly, a silent thank you. A plan forms. Daniel leaned close. We need to get this to someone safe. Elena's eyes shifted toward the hallway, then back to him. Danger everywhere. Even here. Daniel understood. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. If board members were involved, if lawyers were complicit, there might be no one inside Elena's world she could trust, except the one person outside it. The single dad's secret strength. Daniel had spent years thinking he was powerless. Just a construction worker raising a daughter alone after his wife left, scraping by paycheck to paycheck. But hardship had given him something money never could. Resourcefulness. He knew how to survive when systems failed. He knew how to move unnoticed. And most importantly, he knew who he trusted. He pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway, dialing with shaking fingers. After 3 rings, a sleepy voice answered. Dad? Is everything okay? Emma. His 8-year-old daughter. The most important person in his life. Daniel's voice softened instantly. Hey Bug. I'm okay. I just need a favor. The only person he trusted. Emma wasn't just a child. She was the reason Daniel kept going when everything else fell apart. Smart. Observant. Fiercely loyal. And currently staying with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. Remember my friend Mr. Torres? Daniel asked. The police officer? Emma said. Yes. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Luis Torres was one of the few people Daniel knew who couldn't be bought. A detective who had once helped Daniel during a workplace scam investigation. Can you ask Mrs. Alvarez to call him? Daniel said gently. Tell him it's important. Tell him it's about me. Emma didn't ask questions. She trusted her father completely. Okay, Dad. Daniel swallowed hard. I love you. Love you too. He hung up, heart aching. Because he had just pulled his daughter into something dangerous. But he had no other choice. Marcus makes his move. That afternoon, Marcus returned, this time with 2 men in dark suits Daniel hadn't seen before. Security, but not hospital security. Private. Marcus smiled as if greeting an old friend. Good news? Elena will be transferred tonight. Dr. Cole stepped forward immediately. Absolutely not. Marcus's tone hardened. Arrangements have been made. Elena's pulse skyrocketed. Daniel grabbed her hand. It's okay. I won't let them take you. Marcus's eyes locked on him, cold and lethal. You don't get to decide that. Daniel reached into his pocket, feeling the hidden phone. For the first time, fear gave way to something stronger. Resolve. The reveal that changes power. You tried to kill her, Daniel said quietly. The room froze. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. Sure. Dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about. Daniel pulled out the phone. Marcus's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. Too quick for anyone else to notice. But Daniel saw it. That phone says otherwise, Daniel continued. Dr. Cole stepped forward cautiously. What phone? Daniel hesitated, then handed it to him. Marcus lunged. Give that back. The sudden movement triggered alarms. Nurses rushing in, security stepping forward. Dr. Cole held the phone behind him. Mr. Voss, calm down. Marcus forced a smile, but his voice was tight. Private property. Potential evidence, Dr. Cole replied evenly. Marcus's jaw clenched. The balance of power had shifted. Help arrives at the last second. Sirens echoed faintly outside. Moments later, hospital security parted as 2 uniformed officers entered the hallway. Behind them walked Detective Luis Torres. His gaze swept the scene, The tension, the fear, the billionaire family, the exhausted single father. Then he nodded once at Daniel. "You called," he said. Daniel exhaled shakily. "Yeah." Marcus stepped forward smoothly. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding." Torres didn't look impressed. "Funny. Misunderstandings usually don't involve hidden phones and attempted patient transfers." He turned to Dr. Cole. "Doctor, is the patient stable?" "Barely," Cole replied. Torres nodded. "Then nobody moves her." For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely cornered. Elena's silent gratitude. As tension filled the room, Daniel returned to Elena's side. Her eyes were filled with tears. Relief. Gratitude. Exhaustion. He squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe." Her lips moved weakly. Thank you." The words were barely audible, but they hit Daniel like a wave. Because this wasn't a billionaire thanking a stranger. It was a woman thanking the one person who refused to treat her like a transaction. The truth starts unraveling. Torres handed the phone to another officer for evidence processing. Marcus watched it go with the expression of a man seeing control slip through his fingers. Patricia Halloway quietly disappeared down the hallway, not running, not panicking, just leaving. Daniel noticed. So did Torres. "Stop her," Torres said calmly. An officer moved instantly. Because powerful people don't flee unless they have something to hide. A new kind of battle begins. Elena drifted back into sleep, her body exhausted from the effort of staying alive. Daniel stayed beside her, refusing to move. Not because he was told to. Because he chose to. Dr. Cole approached quietly. "You realize this will get ugly." Daniel nodded. "I figured." "Why are you doing this?" the doctor asked. Daniel looked down at Elena, the woman who once told a broke student he mattered. Because she didn't deserve to fight alone. Dr. Cole studied him thoughtfully. "Funny," he said. "All her money couldn't buy what you gave her." Daniel frowned. "What's that?" The doctor smiled faintly. "A reason to come back." But the worst was still ahead. Because exposing a conspiracy is only the first step. The people involved had money, influence, connections. And desperation. As evening fell, Daniel stepped to the window, watching city lights flicker on one by one. Behind him, Elena slept, fragile but alive. In the hallway, police guarded the door. And somewhere in that city, powerful people were deciding how far they were willing to go to keep their secrets buried. Daniel didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew one thing. He wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. The billionaire's final revelation. And the man who proved that kindness is the greatest power of all. By sunrise, Crestview International Hospital no longer felt like a place of healing. It felt like a fortress. Police officers stood at every entrance to the ICU wing. Lawyers paced the corridors with tight smiles. Staff whispered behind gloved hands, eyes darting toward Suite 1702 like they were watching history unfold in real time. Because overnight, the narrative had flipped. Elena Voss was no longer a dying billionaire whose empire was being quietly redistributed. She was a survivor, and potentially the only witness to a crime that could topple one of the most powerful business dynasties in the country. And the man at her bedside was no longer invisible. The hook that changes the entire story. At 6:17 a.m., Elena's eyes opened fully. Not fluttering. Not confused. Where? She scanned the room slowly, pupils adjusting to the harsh hospital lights, breathing shallow but independent for the first time since the accident. Daniel leaned forward instantly, voice soft but urgent. "Elena? Can you hear me?" Her gaze found him. Recognition flashed. Clear, undeniable. Tears filled her eyes. "Daniel," she whispered. It was the first time she had said his name clearly. Daniel's throat closed. "Yeah, I'm here." Her fingers tightened weakly around his hand. "You stayed." "Of course I did." She swallowed painfully, voice raw. "Why?" The question wasn't simple curiosity. It carried the weight of abandonment, betrayal, loneliness. Daniel answered without hesitation. "Because you once stayed for me. A past that finally makes sense." Dr. Cole entered quietly, checking monitors with cautious optimism. "Elena, you've been through severe trauma," he said gently. "Try not to speak too much." But Elena didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on Daniel, like he was the only solid thing in a world that had dissolved. "Library," she murmured. Daniel blinked. "You remember that?" A faint smile touched her lips. "You fell asleep on calculus book." He laughed through tears. "I drooled on it too." "You said, you were nothing," she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. "You told me I was wrong." Her eyes softened. You weren't. The moment she realizes the truth, Elena's gaze drifted toward the doorway, where police stood guard. Marcus, she rasped. Daniel leaned closer. He's not here. He can't get to you. Her expression tightened with pain and fury. He signed it. Daniel frowned. Signed what? The merger, insurance, everything. Her breathing hitched. If I died, he controlled it all. Dr. Cole exchanged a grim look with Detective Torres, who had entered silently behind him. Torres stepped forward. Ms. Voss, do you believe your crash was intentional? Elena closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. Yes. The word landed like a hammer. What really happened that night? Piece by piece, halting and painful, Elena told the story. She had left a late-night board meeting furious after refusing to sign the merger agreement Marcus pushed aggressively. Her car had been serviced that afternoon, routine maintenance arranged by Marcus's assistant. On the highway her brakes failed. Not gradually. Not unpredictably. Completely. She remembered the terror, the loss of control, the impact, and the horrifying realization as everything went dark. Someone wanted her dead. Why she fought to come back. Elena's eyes filled with tears again as she looked at Daniel. I heard you, she whispered. He froze. What? When I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I heard your voice. His chest tightened painfully. You said, I mattered. Daniel blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. You do. You talked about your daughter, about life, about not giving up. A tear slipped down her temple. I remembered who I was. Dr. Cole shook his head softly in disbelief. Neurologically, it was possible. Emotionally, it was extraordinary. She hadn't come back because of machines. She came back because someone reminded her she wasn't alone. Justice begins to move. Detective Torres stepped closer, voice firm but respectful. Ms. Voss, your hidden phone has already been secured. We have enough to open a formal investigation. Elena nodded weakly. Don't let them bury it. Torres's eyes hardened. They won't. Behind him, officers escorted Marcus Voss down the hallway in handcuffs. His expression was no longer polished confidence. It was rage. When he saw Elena awake, he stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, brother and sister stared at each other. Marcus's voice broke through the silence. You don't understand what I was trying to do. Elena's gaze turned cold, not emotional, not fragile. Final. I do, she said hoarsely. You were trying to own everything. Marcus shook his head frantically. I was protecting the company. You were destroying it. Officers pulled him forward. As he passed Daniel, Marcus hissed, This isn't over. Daniel met his gaze calmly. It is for her. The world learns the truth. Within hours, news outlets exploded with headlines. Billionaire CEO survives crash. Alleges sabotage. Corporate power struggle turns criminal. Unknown man credited with saving tech leader's life. Cameras gathered outside the hospital, reporters clamoring for statements. Inside, Elena rested, exhausted but alive. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand like he had through the darkest night. A conversation that changes two lives. Later that evening, when the room was finally quiet, Elena turned to him. You lost work, because of me. Daniel shrugged. I'll find another job. You risked everything. You were worth it. She studied him carefully, not as a billionaire assessing a subordinate, but as a human seeing another human clearly for the first time in years. You always were the brave one, she said softly. Daniel laughed. I don't feel brave. Bravery isn't loud, she whispered. It's staying when leaving would be easier. Her gaze drifted to the window, city lights shimmering beyond the glass. I had thousands of employees, advisors, friends. She looked back at him. But the only person who stayed was the one with nothing to gain. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. I had something to gain. She tilted her head slightly. What? Knowing you didn't die alone. Her eyes filled again. The offer no one expected. Weeks later, after surgeries, therapy, and relentless media attention, Elena Voss addressed the public for the first time. She stood at a podium, thinner, slower, but unbroken. Daniel watched from the back of the room, uncomfortable in borrowed clothes, trying not to be noticed. Elena's speech was short, focused, powerful. During the darkest moment of my life, she said, voice steady, I learned something no amount of money can buy. She paused, scanning the crowd, until her eyes found Daniel. Kindness saves lives. Gasps rippled through the audience as she continued. A man the world would call insignificant refused to abandon me. He reminded me who I was when I couldn't remember myself. Cameras swung toward Daniel. He froze, mortified. Elena smiled gently. Daniel Reyes, would you please come up here? The room erupted in murmurs. Daniel shook his head frantically, but security guided him forward anyway. He stepped beside her, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him. Elena turned to him, eyes warm. You once said your life turned out small, she said quietly into the microphone. You were wrong. She handed him a document. I'd like you to join VOS Dynamics, not as an employee, but as Director of Community Impact. Daniel stared at her, stunned. Elena, I don't have the qualifications. You have the only qualification that matters, she said softly. You care about people. Tears blurred his vision. Plus, she added with a faint smile, I owe you my life. A new beginning. Months later, Daniel walked his daughter Emma through the bright lobby of VOS Dynamics headquarters. Emma's eyes were huge. Dad, this place is like a spaceship. Daniel laughed. Yeah, it kind of is. Elena approached from across the room, walking steadily now, strength returning with each passing week. Emma ran forward shyly. Are you the lady my dad saved? Elena knelt carefully, smiling. Actually, your dad saved me. But you saved him. Emma giggled. How? Elena glanced at Daniel. He stayed alive for you. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Emma hugged her suddenly. Elena hugged back, eyes shining. The true meaning of power. That evening, Elena and Daniel stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Getting pulled into all this? Daniel thought for a long moment. No, he said finally. Because for the first time I feel like my life matters. Elena smiled softly. It always did. Below them, the city pulsed with light. Millions of lives intersecting, struggling, hoping, surviving. Daniel looked at her. You know, you didn't need billions to be important. And you didn't need them to save me, she replied. They stood in comfortable silence. Not billionaire and construction worker. Not savior and survivor. Just two people who had learned the same lesson the hardest way possible. Respect everyone. Because you never know whose kindness will bring you back from the edge.